What is up, Jets fans? Welcome into the very first live stream on the YouTube channel. And it's only fitting that we have BuffaloJetFan as the first guest because he is so gracious to have me every Monday on his channel. So appreciate you reciprocating the favor, BJF. How's it going, man?
Good, man. It's nice being the guest. I'm like, I don't know what our topics are gonna be. I don't have to press any buttons. I just show up and talk about the Jets. It's nice.
Absolutely. I'll do all the heavy lifting for us tonight, so to speak. I appreciate everybody that's already commented, including our guy, Boy Green. He said there will be a trivia question at some random bar in 20 years asking who was the first live guest on Dylan's channel, and BJF will be the answer to that question. So,
There you go.
BJF, if you ever needed to feel like you were the answer to something, that is it. So I appreciate you, Boy Green. Chris B in the chat, I see you showing lots of love. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Like I said, this is episode 1, so a lot of kinks we're going to work out here, but no better person than you to have on, BJF. So just getting right into it. May OTAs. It's only day 3. Yesterday was open to the media. Today was not. Looked really rainy based on all the videos and pictures that the social media team has posted. But I like that they're working outside in the rain, getting the elements. Don't go inside in the turf in the training facility. So right off the bat, BJF, what is your thoughts on practicing in the rain? Do you think this is an AG, like I'm a hard ass kind of coach type of deal, or do you think this is just the circumstances for May showers?
No, I think he orchestrated the weather to be like this to start building a tough nose, grounded pound football team. I think the most important thing was 100% attendance, right, and no injuries. So you like to see that. Aaron Glenn, he definitely has some anti-Salah characteristics, right? It's kind of interesting how each time you go through, like you want the opposite of the former. Like you're like Salah is very like opposite of Gase because Gase just stands on the sideline, and then Salah was maybe a little bit too player friendly. And now Aaron Glenn is coming on and seems like player friendly, but maybe just a little bit more of a hard ass. Maybe I think we're seeing so far.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing some of his demeanor come out first and foremost, right in the press conferences, the way he's conducting practices. Everything seems to be, running smoothly. You mentioned the attendance, 100%. I think that's the first note that I had written down. When you have 100% attendance in voluntary workouts, that just proves that players are buying into what you're selling, the culture that you're building, the everything new going on in the building. It proves to me that they're just buying in, and I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I have so far. You have guys like Garrett and Sauce who are up for contract extensions. What's to stop them from saying, screw you, I don't want to come into camp, I don't want to practice and risk an injury, especially in the elements? But we heard from Garrett Wilson. He said, I want to be part of this thing, I want to make it special. So you're definitely seeing the buy-in with the attendance. I'm not sure we've ever had 100% attendance at this point in camp. I know last year the whole Rodgers thing was pretty, solid attendance wise, but I agree with your point on Glenn. He is night and day different than Robert Saleh, even though they come from a defensive background, first time head coach. You see more of the CEO head coach qualities in Glenn than you do Robert Saleh. So for all the negativity out there, I do think there's a lot of positivity to bring, and it's all unknown. So I get it. A lot of people want to be negative in the unknown, but we could be positive in the unknown. And what are your thoughts on Garrett Wilson? I know he had a lot of quotes. Obviously, he wants to be part of something special. It takes more than just a bunch of individuals. It takes being a team. He wants to make this thing undeniable when they get to that point, when they turn over that new leaf. So everything so far so good coming out of Garrett's mouth. What are your thoughts on our superstar wide receiver and his quotes from OTAs?
I was sorry. Give me someone's at my doorbell. Give me 1 second, brother. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
yeah,
And we'll chop it up
not a
with Garrett
problem.
Wilson. Give me one
Not a
second.
problem. I'll hold it down for a couple minutes while BJF decides if he wants to allow that knocker to come in or not. But my take on the whole Garrett Wilson thing is that Garrett Wilson needs to be paid immediately. If not yesterday, it should be today. If not today, it should be tomorrow. Garrett Wilson, he is going to be one of the mainstays on this team, in my opinion. So I think you have to, give him his fair due. Give him that new contract. He's worked really hard for it. 3 years with just abysmal quarterback play And last year we thought we were going to get much better quarterback play, and we did to some extent, but it still didn't turn into the breakout superstar year from Garrett. He still ended with 1,100 yards, which is a career high. But it seems like BJF has told his guest to politely F off, and now we get to hear his thoughts on Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, my bad. I saw him on like my security thing. I'm like, what is going on? They were lost. Yeah, man. So I think it was encouraging to hear, because to my knowledge, that was the first time that Garrett has suggested that he is interested in signing a contract extension with the team since like it's been a talking point. Sauce has been pretty adamant for a while that that's what he intends to do. And he could have given a cop-out answer of like, we'll see how it goes. I'm just focused on right now, trying to meet my new coaches, whatever. But it was good to hear that, because it seemed like there was some panic among the fan base. Like, is this kid going to request a trade with how last season went down? So I'm hoping both he and Sauce are extended at some point this summer. I mean, why not?
Yeah, and that'll be a good transition, because Sauce has said everything right too, in terms of, I want to be here long term. I want to get the contract. I want to turn this thing around. And honestly, these are two of the most perfect examples of guys that you give that second contract to in Garrett and Sauce. So the fact that they're showing up to voluntary is a huge deal. Now, Aaron Glenn had mentioned about Garrett Wilson that they want to get him the ball as much as possible. And he reiterated it twice in his quote. As much as possible, maybe 150, 160 targets coming towards Garrett Wilson's way this upcoming season. He had 23 in the Vikings game alone, but then he had 26.
Did he really?
20, yeah, the last 4 games of the season, Garrett Wilson had 26 targets. So total drop off once Davante Adams came. What are your thoughts about just how much usage he's going to have, obviously with his college quarterback Justin Fields now in the fold? What is your outlook on Garrett Wilson statistically?
I think you could point to DJ Moore's one breakout year with Fields at quarterback as a barometer for production. And look, there's not a lot of guys in the way, right? Let's be honest. I mean, Davante Adams, you could justify. I mean, I don't, like last year, I don't know if you could make an argument that Davante Adams is better than Garrett Wilson. Like, it's pretty close. It was a 1A, 1B. So I didn't think it was that crazy. I thought that was a little bit overblown. Like, they're not throwing the ball to Garrett enough. Like, they had a bunch of problems on offense, but it wasn't crazy to feature Davante Adams as well. And hopefully we have a passing weapon at some point that is worthy of competing with targets for Garrett Wilson as well. Like, I hope Mason Taylor becomes, the next Travis Kelce or whatever. And that's the situation there. But yeah, man, he should be, I would say, even though they're going to be a low passing volume team, he could easily have his career year just because of the number of targets. I mean, I think he put up 1,100 yards his rookie year. Wasn't that with Zach and like Flacco and Mike White? So probably right around there, probably just over 1,000 to 1,100 yards for Garrett seems to be about the benchmark. And I don't see any reason why he shouldn't be right back there again. I know it's Fields, but it was Mike White and Zach Wilson and all those guys too. So he should be, he should be the wide receiver 1 by a wide margin.
Yeah, you would have to think that Fields can be slightly better than what Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, Joe Flacco, Mike White all provided for Garrett Wilson. Yeah, exactly. We can only hope, and the chemistry seems like it's popping off the page right away. Transitioning that to Fields now, I think Garrett being on the team is just going to be the accelerator to find Justin Fields' confidence, Justin Fields' development as a quarterback. This is a guy, he's going to be like a safety blanket for him. Obviously, they go back to Ohio State for at least a couple seasons, and they had instant chemistry. Now they're picking right up where they left off. And our head coach seems to be fully behind Justin Fields. Now, do you think this offseason it's getting to the point where Aaron Glenn is, as the kids say, it's starting to glaze Justin Fields? Or do you think that all of this is just building up his confidence to when we get on the field in August and September, Justin's ready to go and he's not making those mental mistakes?
Well, it was their decision to bring in Justin Fields, right? I'm sure Aaron Glenn had some say in that. So they probably like him better than the median NFL fan. That's probably fair. But I do think that he would be saying this about any quarterback that he had who knew he was going to be his starting quarterback. Remember when Robert Saleh said he had 3 starting quarterbacks in in those 3 gentlemen? So I wouldn't read too much into it. I think that he's sending the message that they're going to give Justin Fields like a 17 game go. And even if there's ugly moments where you think about putting Tyrod Taylor in, because there will probably be some of those games, that they're going to do the Justin Fields experiment for 17 games. Because what else do you have? What else do you have to lose? It doesn't really benefit you to play Tyrod Taylor unless you're in some weird situation where Fields is playing terrible, but the Jets are competing for a playoff spot, which seems very unlikely. So I think that's what it is there. It's worth a shot with Fields. There's a 0% chance he can improve and become the guy, but I don't think they're banking on that. I still think the most likely what is going to be the biggest thing that will decide this regime's success or failure is what they do at quarterback next offseason. That's not to write off the season. That's not to say, I get all that. I'm just trying to be realistic. I think that's whether that is to give Fields another shot or to draft a quarterback. That's probably what's going to be what decides it for this team. But you like the instilling of confidence with Aaron Glenn. I mean, why not? Why not talk up the guy? And Fields, he seems to praise his work ethic, and teammates seem to like him. That's cool. It seems like a nonchalant kind of dude, easy to root for.
Yeah, and Aaron Glenn was asked about himself as a player and how he kind of gave off similar vibes as a player. He was more quiet confidence. He wasn't very rah-rah. So it is kind of fitting that the first choice that he had to bring in at quarterback is a guy that kind of emulates those same, characteristics. Justin Fields is very calm, humble over hype, like his shirt said when he signed the deal. And that's kind of what you've gotten with Justin for a long time. And perhaps if they are able to bring out that confidence in Justin, it will go a longer way to him being perhaps more of a vocal leader in the locker room to these guys. But when talking about his leadership specifically, Aaron Glenn just was gushing about it. He obviously made the celebrity quarterback quote, which is a Parcells line, but the media kind of took that as a shot at Aaron Rodgers. I'm not exactly sure I agree with that. I think he's just bumping up his quarterback. He's just giving his quarterback all the confidence in the world to be that guy, unquestioned. So did you take it as a shot at Aaron Rodgers, or did you think it was more just, I want to build up my current quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to completely ignore that just because of how Aaron reported that their meeting didn't they don't like each other, probably. I think it's reasonable to assume that. And even as professionals, the only way they know each other, right, is Glenn was a coordinator in Aaron's conference in Aaron's division and this was when Aaron was very good. And then that brief meeting. So, I mean, maybe I think that it was more of just a generic Parcells line. But I mean, Aaron Rodgers is a celebrity because he's a celebrity, right? He could act however he wants. Like, people who don't even watch football know who Aaron Rodgers is. So, if you're a 4-time MVP, a Super Bowl winner, you're gonna be a celebrity. So, but I think he's more getting at speaking about Fields in a vacuum, not necessarily a comparison, because obviously it's not apples to apples. So, I don't think he went out of his way to take a shot at Aaron, but it's hard for that not to come up in your mind, right, when you hear that.
Yeah, exactly. And I said that similar type of thing on Jake's show earlier today. The media and us as fans have been around longer than AG, obviously. He just got here in January. But we're going to take it with those, types of thought processes and narratives and shticks when he says things like that, because we have all this past history to bank on. Aaron Glenn is coming in with a clean slate. He doesn't really care about last year's team or the 2020 team or even the 1999 team or whatever. He doesn't care about any of that history. Right. He cares about the right now. So, yeah, I would tend to agree that he's just kind of building up Fields and his confidence.
Can I answer to Luppy about am I a Justin Fields fan? Well, dude, actually, Justin Fields, when he was coming out of Ohio State, I thought he was going to be a star. That was if the Jets were going to go quarterback. I actually preferred him and Trey Lance to Zach Wilson, and all three of them ended up sucking. Well, Justin Fields is the best of the three, I'd say, by a pretty wide margin, not saying much. No, look, man, once they made a decision to move on from Aaron Rodgers, I think Fields was the least bad option, because guys like Kirk Cousins, even Derek Carr at the time before he retired, those guys have a 0.0% chance of becoming a medium to long-term solution at the quarterback position for the Jets. Justin Fields has a greater than 0% chance. Even if you think he sucks, it's like at least a 1% chance. If you're a huge believer, maybe you think it's like greater than 50. It's greater than 0. But I think that he can improve a little bit. He can be serviceable. He's the quarterback that you could probably win games with him, but not necessarily winning games because of him. But I wouldn't bet on the Sam Darnold, Geno Smith breakout. Like, I think if we were doing a pie chart of like what are all the possible outcomes of Justin Fields' season, like he gets a little bit better, he gets a little bit worse, he implodes and is completely Tim Boyle unplayable, or he ascends and he's like gets a 4-year extension to be the guy for the Jets. Like, I think that, you know, he becomes the guy for the Jets portion of the pie is not more than 50% of the pie, right? It's not the majority of the pie. So I'm being cautiously optimistic about Fields. And I don't think, because if we flip it the other way, if you're like full gung ho, like, yes, Fields is 100% going to be the guy, let's go. He just needs a good coach and he'll be good to go. But if Fields still kind of looks how he has, I don't think that should be a reason to be way down on the coaching staff, right? Because maybe Justin Fields is Justin Fields, right? So that's why I'm just hoping for the best. I'll say this. If Tanner Engstrand can be an average offensive coordinator, Fields has never even had that. And it's probably going to be the best offensive line he's had by a wide margin. It's not a high bar. And those are probably the two most important factors for a quarterback to succeed. Your offensive line, your coordinator, and then your weapons, which they have a wide receiver 1 in Garrett Wilson, wherever you want to rank him in the league. He's a wide receiver 1. And then it's just, there's some things have to go their way offensively for the supporting cast to be really good enough to feel like you're giving him a good shot. Like between Mason Taylor, Arian Smith, and Malachi Corley, I think 2 of those 3 young guys kind of have to pop and maybe overachieve a little bit. And then you got to get Brees back to 2023 Brees. If those things happen, then it's like, okay, you probably have an adequate enough supporting cast to judge Fields. So let's see how it goes, man. I'm cautiously optimistic about Fields. I'll say that.
Yeah, that's fair. And you famously coined the phrase this winter, choose your mid, when it came to picking a quarterback. And I 100% agree that I think they chose the right mid. One of the mids has already retired in Derek Carr, and the other options that were out there were just not going to satiate the fan base, where I think at least Justin Fields brings a glimmer of hope. Like you said, it's probably not a higher than 50% chance that he is the long-term answer, but he at least gives you a non-zero chance to make it on the roster. Luppy also asked earlier, and I can't find the exact comment, but he said, at what point will we see Tyrod Taylor? And I've seen this around a couple times on social media and stuff. Oh, if Justin Fields gets hurt, our season's over. Okay, well, there's 32 teams in the NFL, and they're all saying the same damn thing about their quarterback. If our quarterback is not there on the field with us, our chances of winning significantly decrease. So the same is going to be said for Justin Fields. But on the flip side, you mentioned the O-line, the weapons. This might be the best offensive coordinator, offensive line, wide receiver 1, and running back 1 that Justin Fields has had in his entire career. I can't remember the guy who it was in Chicago. I think it was even David Montgomery before he left for Detroit. And then last year he had Najee Harris and Jalen Warren in Pittsburgh. So I think the whole running back room is going to be the best he's ever had. So when you just stack up the supporting cast around Fields, that should give you more confidence than, oh, I just don't like Justin Fields. I don't think he has what it takes. Look at the whole puzzle, and I think you start to see where the development and the positivity can come from, for sure.
Yeah, and I think anyone who thinks you're being a homer, that is definitely more just saying how poor his previous supporting casts have been, not necessarily that the Jets are the greatest show on turf, right? Because in Chicago, a lot of his offensive lines were pretty unplayable, and the Steelers' offense was a mess last year. Even when Russell Wilson went in, they passed for more yards, but they still couldn't. The last 6 out of the last 7 games, they scored 17 points or less, and they lost. They completely flatlined down the stretch. They couldn't move the ball at all. Steelers Nation absolutely hates Russell Wilson. They actually wanted to keep Justin Fields. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think with Engstrand, The other two OCs he's had are Arthur Smith and Matt Nagy. And I think Luke Getsy for a year before he got fired. So Ken Engstrand, I know he's a complete unknown. Can he be better than those guys? I would think that there's a strong chance that that's the case. I mean, Arthur Smith didn't know how to use his guys in Atlanta. It didn't seem like he carried over a ton of new ideas into Pittsburgh. He kind of just ran the same old things that he did in Atlanta, and it didn't really work. It was just moon balls on the perimeter with Russell Wilson not really throwing the ball in harm's way over the middle, which is fine if you want to be an elite game manager, but Justin Fields has the potential to be a lot more, in my opinion, than just a game manager. So if Engstrand, like you said, could be even league average or 18 to 20th best OC, that's night and day compared to Nate Hackett and Todd Downing. So there's a lot of reasons, not just Fields himself, but the supporting cast that will definitely give you optimism, even though there's so much unknown in the offense. Flipping over to the defense, I want to talk about your guy. I'm going to ask you the question again. When he gets his bust made in Canton, how many facial piercings is Will McDonald going to include on his bust?
There should be a button when you press it. It plays My Chemical Romance for Will McDonald. He's like the emo Brian Burns. Yeah, man. I'm excited about Will because he put on the weight, and if you remember, it was a thing last offseason where he came into camp around this time. I remember. And Saleh said, oh, he didn't put on the weight. And that was the plan. And he just didn't do it. I don't know why it didn't happen, but it's good to hear. And then it sounds like at least the first, 3 days of meaningless practice, where obviously if it's wet and you're not wearing pads, that's like, the guys who do jujitsu, it's like no gi when you're sweaty. Like you're just slipping all over everybody. So obviously you're going to be giving the offensive line the business. But yeah, if he can even be even below average against the run, because I'll be honest, last year Will McDonald was terrible against the run, but he had 10 sacks, and some people say, well, some of his sacks were lucky. Okay, that's fine, but you don't luck into 62 pressures, right? So I think it's a sustainable rate. And if he can be mid against the run, because I don't think he's never going to be Jermaine against the run. It's just not how he's built. But if he can be mid against the run enough to justify playing him 65, 67, 68% of the snaps, because Glenn doesn't rotate as crazy as Saleh. Like the top guys are going to play probably a little bit more. I mean, Will McDonald can get 12, 13 sacks and 70 pressures. No doubt about it. So I'm super excited for him, man. And we're going to need it with Jermaine. I mean, we'll see. I think he's probably going to be on a pretty significant pitch count, I'd imagine, to start.
Oh, yeah. We're probably not going to see 100% Jermaine until maybe week 6 to 8, in my opinion. The first half of the season is just going to be getting his feet back under him, playing at play speed again, putting a lot of weight back on that, and making sure that it'll hold up. But yeah, Will McDonald, I talked about him a couple days ago in a short video about underrated Jets players, and I kind of echoed the same thing you said. He's not very good against the run, at least what the film said last year, and that was a lot due to his play weight. And Robert Saleh came in and he said, oh, yeah, Will McDonald's a lot stronger. And the follow-up question is, well, how much weight did he gain? Because weight gain usually coincides with strength gain. And he said, oh, no, he didn't gain any weight. He just got stronger. You'll see. And we saw
mentally.
Yes. Yeah, mentally he probably did, because a lot of these guys need to be mentally tough to make it through what the last 2 years were. But Will McDonald now gaining 15 pounds, the expectation has to change to where he's not just a situational pass rusher on third down and maybe some second down sprinkled in if it's obvious passing situations. No, I think the expectation should be he's the number one guy until Jermaine is fully healthy. And then he is the adequate number 2, even on 1st and 10. If your drive starts and number 9, now that he changed his number, is the opposite.
I hate that. The 99 was so clean, man. The 99 was such a good look.
It was. And I get it. It's his college number, whatever, but it's tough. It's tough. I mean, I get it to an extent. I'm not going to be the old man yelling at the clouds about numbers, but on the edge, I don't really like seeing like teens. Like we have now 11 and 9 coming off the edge. So it's not really the greatest look, but now you can expect him to be in on first down, setting the edge against the run with Jermaine Johnson. And like you said, I don't think he's as good as Jermaine, obviously, but with the pass rush juice that guy gives you, hell yeah, man. I'm super hyped up for Will McDonald in his, 3rd season? That's crazy that we're already in the 3rd season of Will McDonald. It feels like just yesterday. I still remember my reaction to them drafting him, but I wasn't even sure if he was going to be a fit for this scheme because of how large they like to play on the edge with, guys like Aiden Hutchinson, Zadarius Smith over in Detroit. But adding 15 pounds, that definitely changes a lot of the narrative around Will McDonald. And I'm excited for what he has going on. Aaron Glenn called him a dynamic athlete too. And the length is just ridiculous. His bend coming off the edge. We have, who's our first game? Pittsburgh. Their offensive tackles are not great with Broderick Jones and Troy Fontenot. And then week 2, we have Buffalo. Buffalo can be had. I know that they do have Deion Dawkins still, but he's kind of getting up there. I know he's a big hated person on the Bills for Jets fans, but he ended up being right with a lot of the things he said. But there's definitely matchups that you look at on the schedule, and Will McDonald can easily have multiple sack games this season, and it really intrigues me. Let's see, the youth movement he was asked about too, and I thought this was a cool quote. He said, "You can't be afraid of the young players," and that's a little bit different than just start the kids, which I feel like start the kids is something you say when you're throwing your hands up and your season is kind of in shambles anyway, and you're like, all right, let's just get the Bryce Halls and Michael Carter the seconds out there in 2021 and 2020 and just see what they can do. And if they stick, they stick. This time it seems like they have a more calculated approach to get younger. Obviously they cut Morstead and Zerline last week. So I think they only have 3 guys over the age of 30 on the roster, and Josh Reynolds and Tyrod Taylor. And
I think it's the long snapper.
Yes, Hennessy. Thank you. I always blank on that one. But okay, we know Hennessy's probably not going anywhere. Tyrod Taylor is barely ever going to see the field, we hope at least. And then Josh Reynolds, if he's your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, that's not a bad thing for being the only person over 30 that's doing something on your football team. So what are your thoughts just on the overall youth movement? This is something he learned, he said, from Sean Payton and Jeff Ireland in his time with New Orleans. So it seems like he's taking a lot of good mentorship notes, and he's learning from his processes. So what is your thoughts on the overall youth movement?
Yeah, we mentioned Sean Payton. When Sean Payton took over in Denver, Denver went from the 21st youngest roster in the NFL to the 8th youngest roster in that first offseason. So it's definitely something pretty similar. Yeah, and I think Joe Douglas did do something similar. The difference is that the Jets are kind of in a weird spot because they're not like some people say, like the Jets are tanking, and it's like, okay, well, I hope they do it successfully because they kind of almost tanked last year. They didn't want to, they didn't try to, but they were like one Will Levis fumble away from having the number 1 overall pick. I'm pretty sure. I think we were only 1 win ahead of Tennessee. Maybe I'm wrong, but okay, well then hopefully they actually succeed and we get the top pick, we get a quarterback. But this isn't tanking rosters don't have a recent all-pro at every level of the defense plus a 10-sack edge. They don't have because we've seen it, dude. We've seen 2019, like we've seen what tanking. They don't have a Garrett Wilson. They don't have any guys like that on their roster. So they're not tanking, but they're clearly not in a spot to go for a deep playoff run either. So it's this kind of weird in between season. And while you're doing that, I think when in doubt, it stands to reason to go younger and cheaper. And they've made a lot of I think there's a lot of guys who are on 1-year deals that are playing for potentially long-term deals. One guy I definitely think is Cisco. I think Andre Cisco is going to play himself into a nice 3-year contract next year with the Jets. Still 25 years old, perfect scheme fit at safety. I think there's a few of those guys, like I know, like Stone Smart propaganda on the timeline already in May. But there's a few of those dudes who I think it's almost like we're doing some tryouts here this year to see who's gonna stick around. And you can do that when you're signing 24, 25-year-olds. Can't really do that when you're signing 31, 32-year-olds who at any moment's notice can kind of become washed.
100%. And I'll kind of make this analogy with the job that I do. I work in construction, I work in flooring, and the first day you rip out the old flooring, whether it's carpet or hardwood or whatever, and we call that the discovery period. We have to find out what's underneath that flooring. What does the subfloor look like? What does the bones of the house look like? What does the structure look like? We're in the discovery.
How much is this going to cost?
Yeah, literally, how much is this going to cost? Because you take up your carpet, you see what you have on the Jets offense or defense, and there's big holes in your subfloor. You're going to now go spend major assets, whether it's draft allocations or free agent dollars to try to supplement and fix those holes. So now you're in a period where you've gotten younger, but you've also done it in a calculated manner where you're picking guys who fit your culture, fit your scheme, everything that you want as a player, as a person. So it makes the discovery process a little bit more streamlined. And next season, I can see them taking maybe one or two big swings in the offseason to acquire players that they know fit their scheme perfectly. Because Aaron Glenn said it today or yesterday in the presser. He was like, this isn't an outfit that everybody's supposed to fit into. We have a specific style that we want our players to fit, and it's not just a universal everybody's going to fit. So they're going to be very specific on the guys they bring in. So I'm intrigued by the discovery phase. Obviously,
I'll add that to the discovery phase as well. You know what? They also have to. So guys like Quantez Stiggers, JBC, right? Players like that, or like Isaiah Davis, who we know the previous regime liked them and drafted them and saw them in practice every day. But now they have to kind of evaluate those guys, right? And that's why I think the first free agency is kind of modest, because they don't know what they have there. It was the same thing when Joe Douglas first came in. Remember, they signed Carl Lawson and Corey Davis, and that was it, the first offseason. Then the next one, that's when they went and they got out and they got Conklin and Uzama and DJ Reed and Laken Tomlinson. And it was like it was like 5 8-figure a year contracts. So yeah, they got to kind of find out about those other guys who they're inheriting to what they have there.
Yeah. And
Zach Kuntz,
guys,
baby.
Oh God. And the headline guys that they got this year, you mentioned it, Cisco and Justin Fields. So those were their two top big guys. Obviously, they brought in Brandon Stevens, who his role is kind of yet to be determined. And then they re-signed Jamie and Sherwood. Those were the 4 like headlining moves of their free agency. But it did play out like a more modest free agency approach, a lot of one-year deals, just kind of seeing what sticks in your scheme and your philosophy. Just getting back to a couple of these questions here in the comments. Radical Bongos, great name, says, has Jermaine Johnson been on the field? The only report I saw of Jermaine was that he's working off to the side with trainers. So he's definitely not on the field doing the workouts, but that's okay, because at this point, they're not putting on the pads. They're not really doing much hitting. I don't even think maybe mandatory minicamp in the beginning of June, which is June 10th and 12th. Maybe they put on pads for those. I can't remember if they did last year, but it also seemed like Robert Saleh was very soft in that mandatory OTA period, and they broke a day early, and they, only had 2 days instead of 3 days of OTAs. So once the pads come on, I think that'll be more of a tell of where Jermaine Johnson is. But I do think, mid-season, he's going to be back into form. And then Luppy asked another question, and I'll throw this one to you first. Guys, who do you think will emerge as a surprise starter at wide receiver?
Man, surprise, maybe Arian Smith. That's the only one, because Garrett, obviously, but I don't think Lazard or Reynolds are a surprise. I think that's who you'd almost pencil in at this point, just because they're veterans. Reynolds has some familiarity with the offense. So I think Reynolds has a good shot to be one of the starting 3 receivers. I would bet on that. So Garrett, then Reynolds, and then who else? Like, I guess if one of the younger players were to pop between Corley, Smith, and a UDFA, I would bet on Smith. And it's already quiet for Corley too, right? I'm like, can I get one tweet about Malachi Corley? Can we get proof of life? It's like the least participated practice player ever the past couple of summers. So I hope it's Smith. My logic between Smith and Lazard is, look, Lazard is going to be here for 1 more year. He's slow and he drops passes. Arian Smith is going to be here for at least 4 seasons. He's fast. He drops passes. So, all right, yeah, Lazard's a little better of a blocker, but to me, if you're going to be dealing with drops and some growing pains, why not play the kid that you just drafted, who's going to be here for a long time and who at least brings like a game-breaking element to the team? So if there's a surprise guy, I would throw my hat in the ring for Arian Smith.
Yeah, Arian Smith would be the guy that I would name, but I have to say Josh Reynolds has consistently been my projected wide receiver 2 all offseason, and that obviously leads with a lot of Allen Lazard probably not playing for the Jets, and maybe at this point in the offseason I got to let that go, and maybe Lazard is here to stay for at least 1 more season, which, as painful as it is, you can understand why. They want taller, physical, blocking type wide receivers on the perimeter that will allow the Garretts and Arian Smith and Malachi Corley's to do the underneath stuff and win and get the yards after catch. So I would say Josh Reynolds is my surprise starter. I could totally see them coming out on the very first play of offense. Garrett Wilson lined up all the way to the left. Mason Taylor attached to the formation left. We'll say Corley in the slot right, and then Josh Reynolds all the way on the perimeter right. Like, I could see that being the 11 personnel that they run. Now, they probably run more 12 personnel if we're just being honest, and maybe that third wide receiver is swapped out for Jeremy Ruckert. So you have Taylor Ruckert, and then you have Wilson Reynolds. And I think in two wide receiver packages, you would have to favor Josh Reynolds over Allen Lazard, right? Like, that doesn't seem crazy to me, given the trust that he has with the coaching staff, and he even has, crossover with Muji in Denver. So this guy's been around the coaches enough where Allen Lazard is probably the third guy to me. So Reynolds would be my guy, and then Arian Smith. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm hoping Arian Smith is the type of player where in 2028, when they're making that flag football team, Arian Smith is a name to watch. And that it gives him time, because we just got out of the Olympics and it's not till 2028. But if Arian Smith can pop enough where he has that speed element to him, he might be a danger in flag football. So I would say Arian Smith is maybe not the starter surprise name, but he's definitely going to get his looks early and often.
Yes, and Fields actually throwing he actually has a decent deep ball. It's Fields. It's really the intermediate, over the middle, putting touch, anticipation throws, stuff like that. Those are important. I'm not glazing over those, but I think there's some people think that he is like Tim Tebow. He just can't throw it all. He just has to run the ball. Yes. There's I forget which account it is on Twitter. I could shout it out, but I see it all the time. He's been posting all 22 of every quarterback's throws of 20 plus yards down the field with a clean pocket. And then he charts it as well. And Justin Fields was like, I think he was like 13th or 14th in catchable ball rate thrown from when he does get those opportunities. But he was like very low in like perfect throw rate. And it kind of checks out when you watch Fields. It's like, all right, his wide receiver had a chance. It was close, but I guess for a word like lack of touch, like where it's like, man, that was just dropped right in a bucket for the receiver. But he's given his guys a chance down the field. Right. So I think Arian Smith, like, I know people will say, oh, well, great, you have a fast wide receiver, but you have a quarterback who can't throw. He if he gets a clean pocket and the guy's open, Fields can chuck it down there and give his guy a shot.
Yeah, I remember seeing that clip too, and it was a mixed bag. There were some good throws, there were some bad throws, there were definitely some drops on film too, which they work against the quarterback. But if you watch the film, it's clearly the receiver's fault. So I do think there is an element of he can make every throw on the field, and he doesn't do it like Zach Wilson, where everything is a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. He doesn't have that touch to layer it and feather it over a second-level defender's head and just kind of drop it in the bucket before the safety comes down. But he does have the ability to throw to all areas of the field. I just think it comes down to confidence with Justin Fields the most. If he is starting to get, early confidence throws, like a back shoulder to Garrett Wilson on 1st and 10, a drive starter here, maybe gain 7 or 8 yards, then you can start seeing him unload more and use the middle of the field, use his tight ends like Mason Taylor. Obviously, Ruckert has the familiarity. Stone Smart, who's being labeled as tight end 2, which is kind of crazy to me. Like, let's just see how it plays out in camp first. But I do think there's an element of Justin Fields can make all the throws on the field, which is going to help him in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt about it.
So the last topic that I have is looking at free agency, because I know Jets fans are never settled with the roster as it currently stands. They always want to add more pieces, and I'm kind of in the bucket. Like, I want to see the addition they make before, claiming it to be good or bad. But do you see any position right now that is just absolutely dire to go out and attack? Wide receiver, defensive tackle, linebacker, safety. Do you see any of these positions that are necessary to attack right now?
Honestly, edge would be mine, just because if you look, I don't think they're going to add a receiver. I don't think they're going to add Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, one of those. If they did, cool. Why not get deeper, get more competition, get a veteran. And I think we also have to be honest on how desirable the Jets are for a wide receiver who maybe is going to be playing their last year in the league, like Amari Cooper or Keenan Allen. You might want to go to a higher volume passing offense, but I guess the pitch for the Jets is like you could win wide receiver too. Like not a lot of offenses who are high flying and have, like, okay, you can go play for Joe Burrow, but you're not going to get the ball over, Jamar Chase and T Higgins, right? So maybe, but everything they've done so far tells me they're not going to bring in a Keenan Allen type of wide receiver. That's just following the tea leaves of my guess. And then defensive tackle, they did sign some dudes. They're not the best dudes, but they signed some dudes. I think Derek Nottie and Byron Cowart are rosterable players who it's not crazy that they're in a defensive tackle rotation. They just don't have a bona fide starter next to Quinnen Williams. I don't think and the defensive interior market is disgusting, man. It is so gross out there. But edge, the one I hold out hope for in terms of a big name that does break the youth pattern is Zadarius Smith, because of the familiarity with Coach Glenn. And that's just me holding on to hope, but he'd come in and he'd start right away because you have Jermaine coming back off the injury. And I think edge, if you look at Jermaine, let's say Jermaine, they can't play him week 1, or he can only play 12 snaps week 1. Dude, it's like Tyler, it's all complete unknown rosterable players. Like there's some guys of potential. And honestly, I like Leonard, just personally, I like Leonard Taylor and his potential. I'd bet on that more than guys like Eric Watts there's not one of those unprovens that I'm as confident in. And that's just my 2 cents on Leonard Taylor. It could be totally wrong. So I think edge would be the spot, man. And I hope it's Zadarius Smith, but we'll see.
Yeah, I actually just did a 30-minute film breakdown of Leonard Taylor III, highlighting his run defense, pass rush. Seemed to be, it's mostly positives because I'm not going to, kill a guy who's already on the team. With college prospects, you can, kind of show the negative as to why they were a 7th rounder UDFA. But I don't know, I'm kind of getting onto the LT3 bandwagon as like your heavy rotational interior guy behind Quinnen and Noddy. But I have to agree. Edge is the position that definitely needs some work. Tyler Barron, I mean, what is he listed at? 258 or 308? We don't know what his exact weight is.
That had to be a typo.
It has to be.
There's no way.
They input it for the wrong person. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. Is like they got it mixed up with somebody. But you're looking at him or Clemens being the guy off the edge if JJ's not healthy. So, and maybe they don't do exactly this, but I would love it if they were able to finesse Zadarius Smith signing or a Jadeveon Clowney signing even, and you have him play for the first like 6 to 8 weeks of the season. Jermaine gets back healthy, and maybe you're comfortable at that point, and you can flip that guy for a pick. It might be a very like late future asset, but that's also a possibility too. So I definitely think the Zadarius Smith call out is great. I'm in favor of edge. I like Jadeveon Clowney as well. That's probably not going to be a signing that happens until like the last week of July, because we know how Jadeveon Clowney.
They ain't going to OTAs either of those guys.
Hell no. He's like,
but they're both like the type of size that Glenn likes in his edges. They're those big ass 275-pound edge guys.
Yes, they're going to give you juice in the run. They're going to give you juice in the pass. So I'm definitely all for it. All right, BJF, I greatly appreciate you tuning in or jumping on for the first ever episode on the stream. Everybody in the chat, you guys are truly amazing. So many names that I recognize. Rick Kent, Dano, Bill M, Boomtown, Clancy. You guys are John Hepburn. You guys are great. Like, I know a lot of you guys are coming over from the Jake Asman show, Party with Peg and Artie. I can't say how much I appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll be back. Not sure how frequently I'm going to do live shows, but you can bet your ass that BJF is going to be back on these channels. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and until next time, let's go Jets.